We begin our exploration into the foundational concepts articulated by history's most extraordinary intellects by examining the philosophical framework of Martin Heidegger. Recognized universally as a paramount intellectual force of the 20th century, he was born in Germany in 1889 and ultimately achieved profound acclaim for his groundbreaking contributions to both existentialism and phenomenology. By delving into his perspectives, you will uncover ideas that fundamentally reshaped modern intellectual discourse. From his earliest intellectual pursuits, this German thinker drew profound inspiration from classical antiquity, particularly Aristotle's Metaphysics, which examines the unifying thread connecting all conceivable modes of being. This ancient text ignited the central inquiry propelling his entire philosophical endeavor, prompting him to ask why anything exists at all, or rather, what it genuinely means to be. Driven by a deep fascination with ancient Greek paradigms, his philosophical method functions as an authentic retrieval of antiquity, painstakingly reclaiming vital concepts that subsequent generations had marginalized. By reviving the essential question of being, an inquiry systematically neglected by the metaphysical tradition stretching from Plato to Descartes, he positioned himself as a pivotal hermeneut. He meticulously manipulated language and reinterpreted classical philosophical texts to uncover dormant truths, heavily drawing upon the insights of William Dilthey. Dilthey's emphasis on the vital roles of historical context and interpretation in comprehending human activity profoundly shaped this approach, ensuring that our understanding of existence is always situated within a broader temporal framework. In addition to mastering the existential theories of giants like Kierkegaard and Nietzsche, he notably served as a pupil under Edmund Husserl, the esteemed architect of Phenomenology. This specific discipline operates as the rigorous philosophical examination of conscious structures, strictly experienced and evaluated from a first-person perspective. Practitioners of this method strive to decode the phenomena encompassing our daily realities, operating on the premise that you navigate a perceptual world fundamentally defined by your own subjective awareness. Husserlian phenomenology introduced the pivotal concept of intentionality, dictating that consciousness is inherently directed toward specific objects, thereby rendering human existence as a perpetual confrontation between a subject and the external world. However, the architect of our current discussion initiated his distinct existential trajectory by radically rejecting this entrenched Cartesian dualism. He adamantly dismantled the traditional boundaries separating the mind from the physical body, effectively disrupting the rationalist paradigm established by Descartes, which relied on the isolation of cognitive thought from tangible reality. While Descartes famously proclaimed that the very act of thinking confirms existence, thereby isolating the subject from the object, this purely cognitive reflection fails to encompass the totality of human reality. Before you can even initiate a rational thought, you must first inherently exist, a reality most evident when you are simply immersed in completing ordinary, everyday tasks. It is precisely this mundane everydayness of human life that merits intense scrutiny, asserting that prior to functioning as a logical creature, you are fundamentally a manifestation of pure being. These early phenomenological investigations eventually culminated in his magnum opus, Sein und Zeit, translated as Being and Time, which stands as a monumental pillar of contemporary European philosophy. Although readers frequently struggle with the dense and highly idiosyncratic vocabulary characterizing this extensive manuscript, the terminology is deployed with absolute rigor to uncover the concealed depths embedded within ordinary conversation. Initiating a seismic shift in philosophical direction, the text demanded the creation of numerous neologisms, drawing heavily upon the nuanced idioms intrinsic to the German language. At the very core of being and time resides the foundational concept of Dasein, literally translated as being there, which encapsulates the holistic experience of human existence. While the universe overflows with countless entities, humanity remains entirely unique, as you are the solitary creatures truly invested in deciphering the meaning of your own reality. To formulate it precisely, a human represents that exceptional entity for whom the sheer state of existence constitutes a profound and continuous philosophical dilemma. Dasein and the human condition are inextricably woven together. Absent one, both intrinsic meaning and the essence of reality dissolve entirely. True existence materializes strictly within the boundaries of your conscious awareness, rendering any independent, objective universe profoundly inconsequential without your presence to perceive it. For instance, if a massive volcano erupted with no human witness to observe the cataclysm, this framework dictates that the event is devoid of significance, continually reminding you that we ourselves must remain the primary subjects of our own analysis. As the universal thread binding humanity together, Dasein functions not as a detached ethereal spirit, but as the intensely tangible, inherently social experience exclusive to mortal life. This existence operates continuously through a pre-theoretical intuition, instinctively grasping the a priori frameworks that facilitate every possible mode of being. Relying on this intuitive, pre-theoretical perspective is crucial because imposing rigid academic theories would instantly distort reality, preventing you from perceiving phenomena exactly as they naturally manifest without the interference of an artificial lens. To articulate this unmediated interaction with reality, Dasein is intrinsically linked to the concept of being in the world, an existential paradigm defining human life as a deeply oriented, purpose-driven state of dwelling. Within this intricate matrix, you possess a highly individualized destiny to realize, a pursuit that constitutes an indispensable, defining attribute of your fundamental nature. Functioning as a foundational a priori architecture firmly anchored in the immediate state of existence, being in the world effectively obliterates obsolete metaphysical categories like subject, object, and consciousness. Because Dasein defies traditional scientific observation, comprehending it requires an intense introspective examination of your own lived experiences, isolating the exact qualities that distinguish human life. You must meticulously investigate the unique attributes of your existential situation to determine precisely what elevates humanity above inanimate objects, flora, and ordinary beasts. By scrutinizing these immutable features of Dasein, you uncover universal truths about the human condition that remain absolutely constant across the entirety of recorded history, whether examining modern civilization or society in the year 1000 BC. Moving into the 21st century, we find that the primary characteristic of Dasein lies in its nature as a conscious entity that perceives its own existence as a problem to be solved. Because it functions as an ontological being, this consciousness constantly interrogates its own reality, perpetually wrestling with dilemmas regarding what it will become today, tomorrow, or in the coming year. Heidegger categorizes this deeply personal responsibility to answer such existential queries as mindness, emphasizing that you are the sole architect of your own identity. You possess no alternative method for perceiving the universe or your place within it outside the lens of your own personal reality. A secondary hallmark of this philosophical framework is the concept of care or concern, signifying that you do not merely occupy space, but actively invest in your surroundings through the state of being in the world. Employed by Heidegger as a precise technical designation, care denotes your purposeful interaction with the environment, illustrating that meaning naturally permeates everything around you, rather than acting as a superficial layer added to life. Essentially, you are entirely submerged in significance, rendering it impossible to escape the constant process of interpreting your own reality. Embodying Dasein requires continuous action and direction, characterizing you as an entity perpetually immersed in activities that hold personal importance. Consequently, the very core of this being is defined by its active presence, immediately thrusting you into the intricate frameworks of ordinary daily life and the immersive state of being in the world. Crucially, Dasein represents a collection of potentials that require a specific backdrop to be fully realized and exercised. For those of us undergoing this philosophical examination, that necessary environment is shaped by the specific societal and physical realm you happen to inhabit. As this conscious entity relentlessly pursues authenticity, Heidegger deduces that care serves as the foundational condition of existence, introducing present at hand and ready to hand as essential terms to classify your shifting perspectives on external objects. In your daily routine, you are perpetually encircled by what can be described as equipment, tools integrated into a broader network of utility and meaning. Typically, your interaction with reality occurs through a highly practical, mundane approach categorized as ready to hand, driven predominantly by the desire to accomplish specific objectives. This practical modality presents itself merely as a landscape of functional instruments waiting for activation, a concept Heidegger famously illustrates by analyzing the simple act of wielding a hammer. Upon observing such a tool, your immediate instinct is rarely to intellectually dismantle it into its component materials, but rather to recognize its capacity for completing chores. Consider a skilled builder driving nails. Eventually, the tool fades from their active awareness, allowing them to converse casually or daydream without consciously analyzing the instrument in their grasp. This fluid motion blurs the boundary between user and object, illuminating the broader workspace while inevitably obscuring and diminishing other elements of reality in the process. Through this observation, Heidegger uncovered a vital truth. Within this highly functional state, the traditional division of a thoughtful observer scrutinizing an inert item completely dissolves. Yet, if that same instrument suddenly breaks apart, its utility instantly evaporates, leaving it as a sterile, detached thing occupying space. This transition forces the broken item into a state known as present at hand, occurring when you abruptly analyze something in total isolation, adopting a clinical, scientific gaze focused solely on its raw, objective properties. Naturally, this clinical detachment diverges sharply from your typical perception of the surrounding environment. While a shattered tool initially transitions into an isolated, observable artifact, it rapidly sheds this static condition to become an urgent problem demanding immediate repair or substitution. At this juncture, its essence shifts once more into a state defined as unreadiness to hand, weaving these dynamic modes of interaction into the core architecture of your reality, all orchestrated by the foundational principle of conscious engagement. Ultimately, the philosopher urges you to explore the ambiguous margins of consciousness, stripping away the artificial filters that prevent a profound immersion in reality. The specific matters that capture your attention form the nucleus of this framework, which is supported by a three-part structural foundation: facticity, existentiality, and fallenness. The initial pillar, facticity, is deeply intertwined with the concept of Geworfenheit, or Thrownness, acknowledging that you are randomly propelled into existence, involuntarily assigned to a specific lineage, society, and historical epoch. Consequently, the lifelong pursuits that consume your energy are rarely entirely your own invention. Rather, they are largely predetermined by the inflexible circumstances of your birth. You are hurled into a pre-existing universe without consent or foreknowledge, destined to navigate a reality that will persist long after your departure. Counterbalancing this is the second cornerstone, existentiality, which encompasses the vast array of choices available to you, highlighting that your capacity to embrace different futures is precisely what elevates human consciousness above all other forms of life. Unpacking this concept of potential requires distinguishing between two critical, though confusingly similar, vocabulary words: existentiel and existential. Despite their auditory resemblance, Heidegger assigns them radically divergent meanings. The former word, existentiel, targets specific, tangible dilemmas and practical situations you encounter daily, while the latter term, existential, describes the boundless, underlying essence of reality itself, a pervasive truth that resists being measured or quantified by mere empirical data. Broadly speaking, the practical category points toward tangible substance, representing a physical state that can be clearly outlined, while its counterpart maps the fundamental architecture necessary for any universe to exist. Stated differently, you navigate ontic realities when dealing with concrete, factual matters, but you engage in ontological inquiries when pondering the profound nature of life itself, recognizing that every physical fact intrinsically carries a deeper philosophical weight. Concluding this structural trio is fallenness, a term describing your tendency to slip into an inauthentic state of living, mechanically absorbing default routines and societal expectations without genuine reflection. Societal pressures and the constant noise of external expectations often force you into a collective mindset, making it incredibly easy to succumb to a herd mentality. You inevitably find yourself absorbed in mundane routines, as this tendency to conform is deeply woven into human nature. Martin Heidegger identifies this habit of blindly mirroring others as Dasein, often translated as the they or they self, which stands in direct opposition to the genuine nature of Dasein and the concept of being in the world. Operating within this mode of being with one another means relinquishing your unique identity to a shapeless, anonymous collective, acting simply because that is how things are done, and embracing an inauthentic existence that Heidegger starkly contrasts with a profound, owned self of authentic Dasein. Once you recognize how this fundamental structure of care dictates your actions, your relationship with objects, individuals, and your own identity opens up two distinct paths: an authentic or an inauthentic mode of being. An inauthentic life unfolds when you define yourself solely by your facticity, the unchosen circumstances you were thrust into, and your fallenness, which involves blindly executing duties dictated by society. By functioning entirely as das Man, you ignore your broader existentiality, completely overlooking the rich array of alternative ways to navigate your existence. This hollow experience breeds deep anxiety and dread, pushing you to the very precipice where rationality meets nothingness, absurdity, and ultimately, death. An experience that pulls you back into reality with the startling revelation that you are entirely alone in giving meaning to your world. Through a rigorous phenomenological breakdown, Heidegger demonstrates how the familiar structures that grant significance to your reality can completely unravel, highlighting the urgent necessity of cultivating true authenticity. Achieving this state demands a lifelong commitment to deeply evaluating your available choices, fully accepting your facticity, and genuinely engaging with your inherent historicity, which includes the intricate web of cultural rituals and traditions that shape your background. You must turn a critical eye toward your own fallenness, actively resisting the seductive comfort of Das Man, so that you may blossom into a fully realized Dasein. Ultimately, this transformative journey requires you to take full responsibility for your entire human condition, openly acknowledging your status as a mortal, finite being thrown into an indifferent universe. Genuine authenticity blossoms only when you profoundly comprehend your own unique nature and recognize the distinct individuality inherent in every person. From this deep self-awareness emerges the concept of being toward death, an acknowledgement of the inescapable, final reality that you must eventually confront. Rather than a bleak, fatalistic march toward clinical demise, this philosophy represents a dynamic, empowering state of existence that cuts through the trivial distractions of daily life. It is remarkably easy to drift through mundane routines until the stark reality of your mortality forces you to evaluate your true identity, a realization that prompted Heidegger to advise spending more time in graveyards to remind yourself that integrating the certainty of death into your daily consciousness is the key to experiencing life at its absolute fullest. Beyond the fundamental exploration of being, the second vital pillar of Heidegger's masterwork is the concept of time, which he specifically refers to as temporality. You must understand that Dasein does not merely experience the passage of moments. You are effectively embodied time itself, progressing seamlessly from being in the world to the structure of care, and ultimately to temporality. This temporal dimension serves as the foundational meaning behind all your worldly engagements, deriving its most profound significance from your constant, underlying anticipation of death. Heidegger portrays this temporal experience as an expansive openness, where you are not just a passive observer, but an active participant, relentlessly decoding reality, stressing that you must be ecstatically driven toward your future possibilities rather than languishing in inauthenticity. Through the lens of historicity, Heidegger illustrates that your version of Dasein always acts within a chronological flow, inextricably linked to a broader social and historical tapestry. You inherit a cultural legacy that demands your active engagement, requiring you to make deliberate choices about which crucial fragments of a shared past to bring into the present. History, therefore, is far from a lifeless record of bygone events. It is an intentional, ongoing endeavor where you consciously honor your collective heritage to construct a better future. By grasping that being is intrinsically bound to historical progression, you realize that your identity stretches beyond individual temporality, linking you by an unbroken chain to your ancestors, your community, and the entirety of the human species. Following the unfinished publication of Being and Time, Heidegger's philosophical trajectory underwent a profound transformation known as die Kehre, or the turn, largely sparked by his inability to complete the missing sections of his original manuscript. During this intellectual evolution, he deliberately separated his ideas from the existentialism of Jean-Paul Sartre, specifically criticizing being and nothingness for relying on outdated Husserlian and Cartesian subject-object dualisms, and pivoted his intense focus toward poetry, technology, and linguistic expression. This later framework, best captured in his contributions to philosophy, champions the revolutionary idea that language speaks, framing human existence through historical epochs that each possess a unique interpretation of reality. Ultimately, this fresh philosophical path transitions away from the strict temporality of Dasein, suggesting instead that fundamental human existence is an act of dwelling, a harmonious state where you reside on earth, beneath the sky, before the divine, and alongside fellow mortals in a unified harmony he famously termed the fourfold. When exploring the concept of dwelling, you find that Dasein operates within a familiar framework of meaningful routines and organizational systems. This perspective requires you to reconceptualize being through the lens of Ereignis, a term generally interpreted as an event or appropriation. Consequently, the central inquiry shifts away from asking about the actual definition of being, prompting you instead to examine how this foundational essence genuinely reveals itself. You must approach this profound mystery no longer through the eyes of Dasein, but by looking outwardly from the vantage point of being itself. In this paradigm, humanity becomes entirely claimed by existence, with Dasein completely enveloped by the reality of being. In his later works, Heidegger expressed deep concern that your modern immersion in technological advancements actively severs your profound connection to existence, the natural environment, and the broader world. The essence of machinery and digital progress captivated his intellect, leading him to dissect its core nature within the question concerning technology. His primary focus remained locked on how these innovations fundamentally alter being, ultimately articulating a uniquely technological state of existence. Far from acting as an impartial tool, this technological wave has entirely reshaped the collective human structure, serving as a comprehensive lens through which you interpret Dasein. He argued that the pervasive anxiety characterizing contemporary life stems directly from this mechanized, inherently nihilistic interpretation of reality. It is crucial for you to understand that the philosopher did not harbor an inherent hatred for technological progress. Rather, he sought to expose its underlying characteristics and caution humanity about its existential threats. The profound core of your being in the world fades into obscurity, overshadowed by the monotonous trivialities of daily routines, when natural wealth is merely harvested to achieve superficial goals. As he profoundly observed, the endless loop of consuming purely for the sake of consuming stands as the defining mechanism of a historical era that has reduced our vibrant reality into a sterile, desolate wasteland. Moving deeper into his later theories, he presents the fascinating concept of the last God, famously declaring that humanity's salvation relies entirely on a divine intervention. He clarified that this ultimate deity represents not a conclusion, but rather a fresh dawn, brimming with limitless historical potential for your future. You must recognize that he did not envision a conventional religious miracle, but instead anticipated a profound cultural metamorphosis capable of reviving a secularized reverence for the sacred. He envisioned this widespread societal transformation as the true manifestation of divinity. Ultimately, he posited that you are collectively anticipating a force that will resurrect your poetic consciousness, thereby granting you the ability to genuinely reside within the harmonized structure of the fourfold. While this philosophical pursuit appears genuinely magnificent, it inevitably drags you into the darkest, most fiercely debated territory of his legacy, his notorious alignment with Nazism. You will likely find it profoundly unsettling that the brilliant mind behind Being and Time, widely celebrated as a titanic figure of 20th century philosophy, could simultaneously embrace such a destructive ideology. His romanticized view of agrarian German existence, which he believed possessed the inherent virtues needed to neutralize the toxic spread of modern mechanization, aligned seamlessly with a National Socialist vision of pure, earthbound communities acting as a fortress against external corruption. Historians often suggest that he drifted toward National Socialism under the delusion that the German populace was ordained to fulfill an epic spiritual mandate, hoping his theoretical framework would elevate the entire state. Following the devastating conclusion of the war, he famously characterized his political allegiance as the most colossal blunder of his entire existence. Nevertheless, he consistently failed to offer a genuine apology or assume full moral accountability for those catastrophic historical choices. In spite of these profound personal failings, your ultimate focus must remain firmly anchored to his theoretical concepts. By critically engaging with his relentless exploration of being, you gain the invaluable opportunity to contemplate the depths of human existence and acknowledge his monumental impact on the evolution of modern thought.